If you look at the UK over the last 50 years, it's gone through this absolutely profound economic transformation. The sound of the country has literally changed. The roar of factories and the dust from coal mines, that's all faded away. And it's been replaced by, well, the hum of servers and the buzz of financial trading floors. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into exactly how and why that massive shift happened. It's a question that really echoes through old industrial towns and totally reshaped cities all across the country. You can't help but wonder, where did Britain's factories go? Where did all those jobs, those industries that literally built the nation, where did they all go? Well, this is the story of how an industrial titan became a post-industrial powerhouse. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at Britain's industrial past, what I'm calling its ghosts. Then we'll get into the 3 big reasons this all happened. After that, we'll check out the new knowledge economy that came next. We'll also have to talk about the divisions this created, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at Britain's place in the world today. Okay, let's dive into our first part, Britain's industrial ghosts. And really, to get this, you have to grasp the sheer scale of the change. We're not talking about a minor tremor here. This was a full-on economic earthquake that completely rewired the entire UK. Just take a look at this. The contrast is just wow. Back in the mid-20th century, a massive chunk of the UK's workforce was in manufacturing, making things. Now, fast forward to today, and that sector, it shrunk dramatically. But look at the service sector. It's absolutely exploded. We're talking about it making up something like 80% of the entire economy now. It's a total 180-degree flip. So there's a name for this whole phenomenon, and it's deindustrialization. It's a pretty powerful word, right? And it really captures that decline of traditional industry. But the key thing to remember is that this wasn't a single event. It was more like a slow-moving storm caused by a bunch of powerful forces all hitting at once. Which brings us to our next section, and really the big question. What caused the change? What were the forces behind it? Because this didn't just happen by accident. This massive shift was driven by 3 really powerful interconnected forces. I like to think of them as 3 big dominoes. The first one is deindustrialization itself, the internal pressures. The second is this huge external force, globalization. And the third? That was deliberate government policy, which really steered the ship in a whole new direction. So a huge part of this change actually started from within the UK. For one thing, mechanization. Machines just got cheaper and more reliable than people for a lot of jobs. Then you had the raw materials, the stuff that fueled the Industrial Revolution, like coal and iron ore. Well, they started to run out or just got way too expensive to get out of the ground. And on top of all that, stricter environmental laws in the UK and Europe just made heavy industry a much more costly business to be in. And then you've got the second domino, globalization. Suddenly, the world just felt smaller, a lot smaller. Goods, money, information, it all started flowing across borders faster than anyone had ever seen before. And this completely changed the rules of the game for UK manufacturing. You have to ask, why would you make something in Birmingham if you could get it made for a fraction of the cost somewhere else and just ship it over? It's simple economics. So these big transnational corporations, TNCs, they started moving their manufacturing overseas to find cheaper labor. And with the internet and instant communication becoming a thing, suddenly managing a factory on the other side of the planet was, well, pretty straightforward. Okay, and the final piece of the puzzle, government policy. This gave everything a real firm push. Back in the 70s and 80s, these huge state-owned industries, think British Steel, British Coal, they were sold off. It's a process called privatization, and it cost a lot of jobs. But at the same time, the government started deliberately investing in a completely different kind of future. They put their chips on a new knowledge economy, one built on research, tech, and finance. So, if the old economy was basically being dismantled, what was built in its place? What rose from the ashes? This is where we start to see the UK's modern economic identity really take shape. The UK entered what's known as a post-industrial economy. Basically, the focus just shifted away from making physical things. Instead, it became all about providing services. That's what we call the tertiary sector. And, this is super important, trading in information and ideas. That's the quaternary sector. And you can see the new pillars of this economy pretty clearly. You've got the service sector booming, things like finance, healthcare, education. You have information technology with high-speed broadband and mobile tech. Of course, there's the massive financial services hub in London, banking, insurance, you name it. And then there's research and development, which is a vital part of that whole quernary, knowledge-based sector. You know, a perfect example of this new economy in action is the rise of the science park. They often pop up clustered around major universities. And this quote about Cambridge really nails it. Cambridge has attracted many high-tech businesses and research institutions to the area, creating a mass of knowledge and expertise. So, why Cambridge? Well, it's pretty much the perfect recipe for success in this new economy. You've got a world-class university right there, pumping out brilliant graduates and new ideas. You have excellent transport links, especially to London. You've got this huge pool of talent to draw from, and it creates an environment that just encourages collaboration and sharing knowledge. It becomes this awesome, self-reinforcing cycle of innovation. But, and this is a really big but, this transformation wasn't a smooth ride for everybody, or for every part of the country. The shift from factories to finance created some very clear winners and some very clear losers, and it ended up carving a deep economic divide right across the UK. This is what's known as the North-South divide. And look, it's not just some old cliché. It is a very real, measurable reality that you can see in everything from health and house prices to earnings and even political influence. And when you look at the comparisons side by side, the differences are pretty stark. The North was the heartland of all that traditional industry, so it really suffered the most from deindustrialization. That meant higher unemployment, slower population growth. The South, on the other hand, was less impacted and captured more of the benefits of that new economy. And you can see the results right there, in everything from employment rates to the crazy difference in house prices. So, have there been attempts to bridge this gap? Yeah, for sure. Governments have tried. You've probably heard of the Northern Powerhouse Initiative, which is all about boosting economic growth in the North. There are also things called enterprise zones, which offer tax breaks to try and attract new businesses to specific areas. And a big focus is on investing in transport to better connect all those northern cities. All right, let's move on to our final section, Britain's global future. So what does this new UK economy actually look like on the world stage? How is it all connected? And what's the infrastructure that holds it all together? This chart of where the UK gets its imports from is really revealing. It just shows how plugged into the global system the UK is now. I mean, that's a direct result of moving away from making everything at home, right? You can see that ties with the EU are still really important, but you also see the huge role that global players like China and the US play. It really drives home that the UK is a trading nation, through and through. And to make all of that work, you need massive infrastructure projects. These are absolutely key. We're talking about everything from upgrading super congested roads like the M25 to building brand new rail lines like Crossrail in London, to building enormous new ports like the London Gateway, which can handle the biggest container ships in the world. These projects are basically the arteries that keep this modern service-based economy pumping. So, there you have it. The UK has navigated this absolutely monumental shift from an industrial to a post-industrial economy. But, change is the only constant, isn't it? Which leaves us with one final, pretty critical question to think about. After moving from factories to finance, what's the UK's next great economic shift?